Everyone see that? The slide, KPI retrospective report and theory of change.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so we're going to be talking today about two pieces of work that we have done over sort of the last, I don't know, biennium, I guess. Oops, there we go. My advance doesn't want to advance. It's frozen. Hold on, there we go. So as you know, we collect a lot of data from all of you, and we have actually, we've been collecting data around KPI for, well, this will be our 10th year, which is impossible to believe. Makes me feel very old. But so what was asked of us by our DELC partners was, what could we learn if we looked back at all of the data that we've been collecting, and what are some high-level changes that we might be able to talk about? Kind of what is the summary of what impact KPI has had over the years? And then what are some of the recommendations as KPI moves into its really second decade of implementation and investment fund? So as you know, as I said, and you know all too well, we collect quite a bit of data. It's morphed over time, but currently we collect a program survey that collects all of the information about your KPI funded programs, as long as they're, and that feeds into DELC and supports your reporting. We collect outcome data on series and multi-session programmatic efforts. We get outcome surveys from parents and providers who participate. And then we also have, over the years, done a number of different case studies, so in-depth looks at sort of interesting, innovative practices that are happening, or things that are moving the field, or things that really DELC or the Early Learning Hub partners have wanted to learn more about, like, oh, and in this region, they're doing this, and it'd be so great to have something that looked more intensively at that piece. So we've done those case studies, and then we've done some statewide pieces. Haven't done those for a while. Those are anchored in the kindergarten readiness assessment data. So this is just a list here of many of the different reports that we summarized in our, what we're calling the retrospective report, right? So looking back at KPI. We summarize the outcome reports and all of the data summaries from a number of years, program survey data, which we started in 2019. So what do the programs look like? What are the characteristics? How many families are you serving? A series of case studies done in 2017, as well as a few other years. Systems interviews that we did, and to develop a conceptual model of KPI work, like where is it hitting on systems levels, as well as the KPI equity briefs, which ask the question of how is KPI including and intentionally reaching out to marginalized, racially and ethnically marginalized communities. So those came out in 2019. We all of you have had access to these at one point, but if you have anything you ever want from us in terms of a report or a copy of something, let us know. We're happy to share. And then the 3 statewide analysis reports, where we looked at the relationship between KPI implementation and kindergarten readiness outcomes. And then some other stuff that we did around qualitative data, looking at systems and how KPI was being used to look at, to build, to leverage work that you're doing around the early childhood system more broadly. And then finally, another focused evaluation on Northwest Regional, I think the Northwest Regional Hubs, KinderCamp evaluation findings. So that's a lot of data, and we went back and reviewed all of these in our systematic review to come up with what we're going to share today in the outcome report. And get my screen to advance. It just goes to sleep, and then it doesn't want to talk to me. Come on. There we go. All right, so I'm going to just summarize just some of the patterns we've seen in the outcomes data. And this probably isn't a surprise to any of you who've been around for a year or two, that we have systematically seen a consistent pattern of positive outcomes in the area of family engagement and kindergarten transition. Excuse me. So these are when you have a series, multi-series events that support family engagement and building kindergarten transition readiness for families and children. This is the outcome tool that you are using, and this summarizes all of the data across the years that those surveys have been collected. And you can see it's really, really consistent with about 40 to 50% of folks. This is just an example of one of the outcomes around parent confidence, that they feel confident knowing how to promote children's reading. And that increases in their retrospective report to about 75% they're definitely feeling confident that they know how to promote children's reading. So that suggests that participating in these types of programs helps to build parent confidence around promoting children's reading skills. And then the next slide. Just another example, again, with a really consistent pattern of outcome data. You think about averaging across all of the different programs that you offer, all of the different hub regions that are included. Again, the pattern is really, really consistent with about 25% parents increasing their comfort level at school before and after. It's from about 40 to 50% to about 75% feeling very comfortable at school after participating in a family engagement or kindergarten transition type of activity. The next two slides summarize our outcomes for professional development. So this is around shared professional development for early learning providers and kindergarten teachers primarily. Not all, but K-3. And what this shows, excuse me, is the percentage of folks who are saying after participating in one of these sessions, that there are changes that they would make to increase alignment, that things they wanted to do. And you can see here that a lot of folks are saying, yes, I'm definitely thinking I'm going to make changes after participating. And the green bars are the K-12 teachers, K-3 for the most part, with the gray bars being early learning providers. So again, that work that you're doing together to build a shared understanding of how do you make sure there's a smoother transition between the early learning setting and the K-3 setting for children. Okay. Then just, I think, one more example of our professional development outcomes data that, again, looking before and after participating in a shared professional development activity or series, that they definitely agree that social emotional learning is essential for children. You can see that consistently we see increases, although interestingly, a lot of them, as we moved up, I think this speaks to sort of mindset shifts and awareness of social emotional as a key aspect of children's learning across the board. More people said before that they felt like it was important, but pretty much everyone agreeing afterwards that they understand that this is an important aspect of children's development and academic success. Okay, so this is taking a big jump. So we have survey data that suggests positive outcomes across a number of domains based on parent and provider participants report. We also have the other data that I shared with you from kindergarten assessment data and our case studies and our systems interviews and all the data that we compiled over the years. And based on that and our review, we asked the question, like, what do we see as really important to contributing to quality programming and positive outcomes? Where do we people talking about changes at the system level that we might attribute to KPI investments? Where do we see consistency in positive parent outcomes? And so this summarizes some of the key, what we call drivers of quality, looking across all of that data and all of those years. So the first one is dosage. Again, looking at things that happen for multiple times over longer periods of time. So thinking about, having things that involve parents over the course of a year instead of just 1 or 2 sessions, thinking about professional development activities that really go beyond like having a 1 or 2 time event and closer to, long-term commitments and relationship development. So dosage being important. Having models that are related to and have an evidence base. I don't mean evidence-based in sort of the must have a randomized design, but have some sort of research that supports their effectiveness. And then also that are culturally relevant or culturally specific. And I want to name, and I'll talk about this in a minute, that those things are sometimes in tension with each other, right? That a lot of our evidence-based program models are not particularly culturally relevant, and almost none are culturally specific. But that seemed to also be a driver of quality, really being able to engage families in those types of activities that are adapted or developed for families who bring different cultural and linguistic experiences to their families. The next one is around multi-level interventions. So hubs that were using the money to really not only invest in, say, individual interventions. So that's just like things that focus on individual skills of the children or the parent or the teacher, but like use some of their money to really leverage across levels of the system. And the levels of the system that we were looking at are listed below. So we have, starting at the bottom, sort of individual level interventions. This is things that focus specifically on developing skills in the individual person. Interpersonal interventions, so things that build relationships, like things that bring preschool and elementary teachers together. Organizational or community interventions, so things that are sort of everyone in our district or in our region are really working together to try to increase our curriculum alignment or whatever the outcome might be. So things that went more broadly than one child, one program, but more broadly. Similarly, organizational types of changes, like really making sure that early learning was within elementary schools, was an example of sort of a contextual change that seemed to be important. And then things that this was less frequent, but population and policy change, so advocacy and family leadership around things like publicly funded universal preschool or other things available to all families in the community. So multi-level interventions were an important piece of quality. And then shared professional development, making sure that the professional development funds that are being used really do bridge the systems rather than just being focused, say, all on early learning or all on kindergarten teachers, but those things that, because remember, kindergarten, the purpose of part of this fund is to bridge those gaps, to create those aligned pathways between pre-K and elementary. So that shared professional development was really important. Then finally, the report developed or identified some, what I think may be very familiar to all of you who've been implementing this work in community, longstanding challenges that local implementers and hub directors and other folks have faced. And they're not challenges so much as they are tensions that we see play out as folks have been implementing the work. So the first one I mentioned already, which is this tension between, should we use an evidence-based model or do we do something that's more tailored or locally adapted? And how do we balance the folks in the room who may be saying we need to use evidence-based models versus things that we think are going to be more culturally relevant, culturally specific, community adapted, and making the case that those are worthwhile investments. Another tension or challenge was around getting buy-in from the elementary school system and making sure that those folks were on the table. Over the years, there's a lot of stories of turnover at district and principal level that really undermined or sometimes supported, if it was for the positive, implementation of kindergarten readiness types of programs. And then another final sort of challenge or tension that played out was hubs struggling to decide, or not struggling, but balancing the decision of how to invest those dollars, with some hubs using sort of one strategy, all the money for one strategy, and other hubs using that money more flexibly to fund a variety of things across a number of outcomes. So that's not so much a challenge, but just a difference that we noticed in looking at the implementation across the years. Okay. So getting to some recommendations based on our retrospective analysis. First of all, one recommendation just was, prioritizing investments that reflect some of these quality drivers. So thinking about, all right, what is 10 years of data collection said about where those investments might have the most impact, and trying to prioritize those investments. Encouraging work that really intentionally focuses on that cross-system alignment, which I know is a huge part of your overall mission as hub directors, to align early childhood systems and include K-12 in that alignment. But using KPI dollars intentionally to do that is something that we saw as important, and where it's happening has created some positive changes. Strengthening accountability for engaging priority populations. So some of the work that we did around equity and whether or not hubs or KPI funds were being used and to intentionally engage communities of color and linguistic minority communities, non-English speaking communities, or other priority populations, rather than just having that as sort of, this is our eligibility criteria, but no intentional deep work to make sure that that was happening around accountability for reaching those populations. And then finally, reviewing and improving the evaluation methods. So how do we make sure moving forward for the next 10 years that this evaluation is continuing to help us learn, not just reinventing the wheel and measuring the same things, making sure we're focusing our limited evaluation resources on the things that are important to you all, while reducing administrative burden as much as possible. Okay, I'm going to pause for questions, and then we're going to move to some breakout rooms. So just first, any questions or reflections, surprises from what you heard, or this is old hat, we've known this all along. Just curious if anything stood out to anyone.
Beth, I just appreciate the tension on the slide between the evidence base versus developed locally, and buy-in from elementary school, like at the system level, what you need, and then the one strategy versus many strategy. I feel like I would imagine a lot of people are in that same boat of like, what's your path forward when those are both, possible solutions or possible approaches. So just appreciate you stating that.
Thanks, Michelle. Nice to see you, by the way.
And Beth, I have a question for you too. I'm just, first of all, thank you for this information. And I echo what Michelle is saying around the tension. And I think we've all felt that tension in our regions as we implement this work. And I think also holding out that it's, working with school districts in particular in this way also provides a lot of both challenges and opportunities, and some successes too. So I think that's great. As you put this together, and with your longstanding history with KPI, I'm wondering what is exciting from your perspective, or what is like, these are some nuggets here that we should really be pushing on as we think about KPI moving into the future, particularly as we are bringing in some of the literacy components as a part of. I know they're kind of separate, but it's, and KPI is the funding vehicle for that, but also this is a way for us in our community to really deepen our work with our KPI sites and more.
That's such a great question, Lisa. And I kind of want to put a pin on it, because we're going to come back at the end and talk about like, where do we want to focus our evaluation resources in terms of those exciting nuggets, and wanting to hear from you. Like, where do you feel like KPI fund investments are really making a difference? I think part of what you heard from us was some of our recommendations around, and this ongoing tension that we see. Maybe this should have been another one, but this between individual, like kindergarten transition programming that really focuses on individual kiddos and families and building their skills to things that focus more on the system and getting the system ready and the schools ready and the systems aligned. So knowing that both are important, but how to balance those things. And I think the places where maybe there's efforts in both domains could be really interesting to learn from that. And I think the accountability around equity piece moving forward, especially with the early literacy funds and how those are going to roll out to families in a way that's culturally specific and responsive, I think is going to be really interesting to see. Other questions or comments before we move into some time for you guys to reflect on some of this together? All right. Isabella, so I can share my screen with the prompts, but I think we can also put these into the chat when we move into Jamboard. And Isabella, you have the Jamboard, and I think Maria, you have the breakout rooms. So we're going to break out into rooms. You can choose your own room, and they can arrange by these 3 topics.
I
So depending on where you, yeah.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say, I think ideally we would have liked people to self-select, but I think for the purpose of this meeting, we're not able to at this time. So my, I guess encouragement is if Maria is able to separate us into maybe groups, like 7 groups with each group having 5, and I think 1 group of 4. And then if folks can kind of prioritize or look at slides that maybe don't have a whole lot of sticky notes and see if you could converse about those things, but see where your conversations take you. But sorry, Beth. to
No,
cut you
that's
off.
helpful. And you have the links to the Jamboards.
Yes, I put it in the chat. I can share my screen as well to kind of go over the ask.
Do that.
See. Okay, so we have this Jamboard set up with 3 slides. Each of those slides is kind of one of those recommendations that Beth just talked about. The first one is, how do you prioritize KPI program investments that reflect quality drivers? And a reminder, we kind of put those down here. And then if you want to reflect as well, maybe what things get in the way. The second slide is, how does your hub focus on cross-system alignment? And similarly, what gets in the way of that? And then how can you strengthen accountability for engaging priority populations? And then again, what gets in the way? So we encourage folks when they get to their breakout rooms to kind of reflect on these questions and add sticky notes, type up whatever you may want to reflect on and put it on here. And like I echoed before, if you see a lot of folks maybe focused on cross-system alignment, maybe you say, hey, let's look at engaging priority populations, just so we can hear about all different aspects of the work. But does that sound good to people? And I'm thinking maybe for time's sake, only like 4 to 5 minutes. And if we could get back to the group around 1:40, if that sounds good. Beth and Maria, does that time-wise, does that seem okay? Okay, perfect.
All right, I will create the rooms.
Thank you.
That was so fast. Like that
Yeah,
was.
were we only supposed to be in there like a short period of
I
time?
know, like a
We
hot
were
minute.
just getting started on conversations. I
I
thought,
know, us too.
like, try to like arrange. Okay, all right.
Yeah, we have a little bit more of our agenda today, so I wish we could stay in them longer, but is there anything that maybe people stood out that we want to take like a minute or two to quickly address? And then also if people want to keep adding to the Jamboard post meeting, we can like kind of take a look at take a look at it after as well. But is there anything people want to share?
Begonia, I see your comment in the chat and I agree. I think we are trying to do maybe too much in too little time, but our hope was to start to compile some information, which is why Isabella is saying we want to keep these Jamboards open to get your ideas, because we're interested in hearing from you about like what is happening in your hubs that you feel like is quality or is holding up accountability to reaching to doing equity focused work. And this was obviously not enough time to really do that.
Right, Beth, maybe a different approach, if that was what your team was aiming for, was to have one-on-one interviews with the different hubs when we have a meeting with the hub navigators, and then we can dive deeper into each of the 16 regions, and then you can aggregate the feedback, and you can have a comprehensive study instead of like speed dating here for like
Yeah.
2 minutes, right?
Yeah. All right, should we go back to our presentation, Isabella?
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Okay. So the second part, so that was from the retrospective studies, super high level findings. And we will, of course, we have shared that report with you, and we'll share again. I think we shared it with you. Pretty sure we have. Right, hopefully I can, there we go. All right, so the next thing, whoops, that we want to talk about, some of you were involved in this, but we were asked by DELC to work with you all, and we created a work team that had representation from different hub regions to develop a theory of change. And the rationale behind this was that a theory of change can be a useful way to communicate the purpose of KPI dollars and investments, and also to help funds think about like what is and what isn't kind of best practice with KPI investments. There was a lot of interest, I think, in the working team around having something that could be developed into a communication tool, because there was a sense, this is my interpretation of what we heard, that there's still not a lot of community awareness or partner awareness, maybe even with some of your advisory groups, of what KPI is designed to do, what the key strategies are, and what the outcomes that are expected. So we engaged in a process that took us about a year of working with the state level folks as well as the hub work group, and to then presenting this, getting feedback from you all, and then getting approval for DELC for the theory of change. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of what we landed with. And your eyes are going to blur over here for a second. I'm going to go quickly away from this, but this gives you a picture of the whole theory of change. We've used theory of change or theory of action in other projects really as a touchstone, sort of to be like, okay, let's remember, what is our vision? What assumptions are in place that really need to be, things that need to be in place to support effective work? What are the key strategies that we're really talking about in terms of implementing for this work? And then what are those short-term and long-term outcomes that might be expected from KPI dollars? So I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of these. So narrowing in and talking about the vision, which is really aligned with Raise Up Oregon. These are straight from Raise Up Oregon. We see KPI is directly aligned with that vision. Some of the grounding assumptions are, again, around having a shared vision, that there's a shared vision around pursuing equity, and this might be at the state level, but more importantly at the hub level. Do you and your partners have that shared vision? If so, that's going to make KPI work a lot easier, a lot more successful. Do you have adequate resources and support? Always problematic, but funding and staffing as well as technical assistance as needed around KPI interventions. Do you have leaders who are willing to come to the table and partner, right? This is where some of the challenges that came up in my small group were related to having school districts that continually, or schools that really are still struggling to come to the table and understand what is KPI, why should I have school investments or time in before kids get to school. that there's an iterative process and flexibility around identifying community strengths and needs, and that there's really a cross-sector partners involved in prioritizing and making decisions about KPI investments. And then in terms of the strategies, these are going to be really familiar to you. We tried to create some clusters of what are the things that KPI does that makes KPI KPI. So implementing kindergarten transition programs, facilitating equitable access to those services, hosting community events of a variety of types, shared professional development, investments around staffing and resources for coordination, because we know that that work doesn't just happen like magically by itself. And then we had to create a category for other, which is always nice, but sort of other things that fell into KPI and seemed like reasonable investments, but they were hard to categorize in terms of other boxes in the theory of change. Whoops. Here we go. And then in terms of outcomes, lots of conversations around the expected outcomes of KPI and sort of thinking about what's short-term versus really more long-term goals. And those are really big picture, sort of high-level goals you can see. And the short-term goals that we've articulated and used to develop the surveys and the outcome evaluation around specific child and family outcomes, professional development outcomes, system outcomes, and then the long-term systems goals. And I'm not going to read through all of these in the interest of time, but I think these should look fairly familiar to you. And again, the expectation, not that everybody's doing everything, but that we're trying to capture this very diverse set of KPI investments and what that money is being used for, and kind of boil it down into a single place where everyone can see, like, this is the kind of work, or these are the boxes where my hub is making investments or my communities are making investments. So these are the outcomes that we might expect within my hub, given where those KPI dollars are going. And we are going to do a little bit of a reality check with you all. Looking at outcomes, want to ask the question again, which outcomes is your region focused on for KPI investments? And Isabella, help me out here. Should I click on this link, or do you have the link to the Menti poll?
I sent it in the chat because the one on the slide you have currently is not the updated one.
Okay.
But I put it in the chat. Everyone should be able to access that.
So if you click on that link, you'll get a series of outcomes, and we're just asking you to say, which of the outcomes do you most focus on? These are the outcomes in the theory of action, and we're hoping that you see the outcomes that you think are going to happen for your hub in that list. And hopefully we can see the responses in real time.
Yeah, I can share my screen,
Okay.
Beth, if you're able to stop for a
Yep.
second. Thank you. Okay. Perfect.
We'll give folks just another minute. All right. So this is interesting. And I'm curious, so something else, that other category, but lots of system building investments, which is awesome. Lots of kindergarten transition programs, not surprised by that. Lots of shared professional development. Hoping that everyone is able to see something in the list of outcomes that they feel like KPI is doing for their community. If not, we're interested to hear what's missing. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Isabel and I are doing the tag team today. Okay. All right. So the last thing we want to do with our time together is to get some input from you. We've been asked again by the state to use some of our evaluation resources to do some one or possibly more case studies, but we're curious as to what you all think would be most useful. So if we're going to focus on an area and try to learn more about that area, are there certain things that you think would be most interesting? And these were things that came out of our discussions, both with the retrospective evaluation and the DELC team, as well as the ongoing work with the A Theory of Change working team, as well as our own reflections on the retrospective report. So we came up with these ideas: workforce development partnerships, what those look like, learning more about those, where those are successful and how to make those happen. More work around how hubs are reaching those priority population and what works, what are the practices we could lift up and learn from. What's happening with 0 to 3? This is a growing area for KPI. So that was another question we had, was whether that would be a useful place for us to focus. And then finally, where are the culturally specific and culturally responsive investments or adaptations happening? And is there something we might learn from those? And then finally, any other ideas that you have, you could put in the chat. But we're going to do a little poll, and you have 3 options. You can vote for each one of these, whether you're interested in learning more, that you could actually participate and share, like we're doing some really great work around workforce development, or this feels old hat, not super interested in this. All right, so I'm going to go back to Isabella and let her share the poll.
Yeah, so this one is actually in the form of a Qualtrics survey, so I'll put it in the chat just because some of the answers
Oh, right.
we want you to be able to provide like a short response or your name if you are like if there's a topic that came up that your hub is doing, you might be able to share some knowledge about. You can put it in your name, and then also, yeah, those other ideas that can come out of that. But I put that in the chat.
So this is called How to Do a Survey with a Sort of Captive Audience. So yeah, folks could click on the Qualtrics link. We'll get your answers, and that will help us come to a decision about how we move forward with the evaluation, in addition to the pieces that we already support with surveys, and appreciate all of you having your conversations, collecting the data, and coordinating with Isabella and Diane to get that collected. Isabella, are we going to share this out when we collect it? What?
Yeah, I think
Yes.
also it might be good to have like a follow-up, especially with the Jamboard, if people are able to fill that out. And I don't want to like overpromise anything, but if there's some sort of like summary we can do if folks are interested, because I know we didn't get a lot of time today for that. But yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to pause here while you all are working on your survey and just thank you for a decade of KPI partnerships with us, as well as with your communities. And looking forward to another year of learning, and always open to questions and support for making the evaluation investments useful for you all. I'm going to hand it back at this point to Maria.
Thank you so much, Beth and Isabella, for that information. And I will also include the link to the Jamboard in our recap email. So feel free to continue to add information there. And we will absolutely make time for Beth and Isabella to come back and share what was gathered from the surveys. And we can look to continue that partnership. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
All right, we are going to transition into having Gabby and Karina present up, and I will hand it right on over to them. Gabby and Karina.
Gabby, you're muted. Greetings, everyone. That's my welcome. It's good to be here with you all once more. My name is Karina Guzman Ortiz. I'm Partner Engagement Specialist. I know we were here, Gabby and myself, this was probably back in November. But Gabby, I'll hand it to you for introduction, and then you can jump right in. We are being flexible and adaptive here, so we're going to actually do this as a two-parter once more, and I think that worked out well last time. It's don't want to overflood folks with information, and then also just make sure that we allow enough time for feedback as we work on the strategic plan, which we've shared before, really leaning into it as a collaborative effort.
Yeah, thanks, Karina. And can everyone hear me? No? Oh, okay, good. Okay, so like Karina said, we'll be doing this in a two-parter. So what we're going to be going through today with everyone, and I know that Maria's shared the slide deck with you all. We made some minor modifications, so I'll be sure that you guys get this updated slide deck. Nothing was really added, so the content that you guys reviewed should still be accurate. We just added our mission, vision, values slide and our DELC equity statement slide, but just want you all to have that. So you will see those extra slides here in this deck. So what we'll be going over today is just a recap of the strategic plan process. We'll be reviewing the partner engagement themes that surfaced from all of the conversations that Karina and I had with external partners, families, providers, and internal DELC staff while we in the development of the strategic plan. We'll also be going through the draft goals and connecting some of the themes that tie into each goal. And then next time we'll come back to really kind of just share or do a feedback opportunity with you all. And I think you all have those questions, so really kind of just want you all to resonate with those a little bit. And I'll share some next steps for what to kind of expect in like later April, May, and June. Perfect. So we are just going to be sharing the draft goals that have been drafted based on the feedback that we received from external partners. Here you'll see, DELC strategic plan purpose, and it's really just to be a North Star for the agency's work over the next 3 to 5 years. The plan, as you all know, is required by the governor. All state agencies are updating their strategic plan. Since we're a new agency, we're creating one completely from scratch. And the strategies and objectives are actually still in development of that. So that's why we're really just here to share some of the draft goals that stemmed from those conversations. And also just want to highlight that these next couple slides will have our mission, vision, values, and our equity statement. And want to just emphasize that equity is embedded through all of our draft goals and our high-level themes. And that the vision for our strategic plan is to have it be a living document with the goal of it being responsive to children, family, and community needs. And I won't spend too much time on this slide, but just want to acknowledge DELC's mission, vision, values. It centers around equity, respect, trust, relationships, safety, continuous improvement, and integrity. I think a lot of you all have seen this slide before. And DELC's equity commitment statement. The strategic plan is going to affirm DELC's commitment to dismantling the systems of oppression that harm and create disparities for communities who are historically and institutionally excluded. And then again, just a quick recap of our plan for the external engagement and what Karina and I have already done. We went and met with external partners, providers, and families, posed those 4 key input questions that we had initially shared with you all. This yellow box here shows everybody that we've received feedback from. And in addition to those small group conversations, we also had a smart sheet that we widely shared out for folks who wanted to leave feedback in that manner, and offered one-on-one time for anybody to connect with us as well, so that they could do that. Perfect. And then this next slide, I'm going to pass it to Karina to kind of talk about some of the themes that surfaced.
Thanks, Gabby. You'll see here, this might look a little busy. I believe now Zoom allows you to zoom in, so you are able to pinch in on that screen, or so I've had luck with, but it might depend on your screen. Overall, though, these are the themes from the engagement that we gathered over the last several months. At a high level, we do acknowledge that several of these themes have surfaced in ongoing conversations, right? And in conversations that were prior to the engagement, and that will continue. And so just wanting to acknowledge that although we set out to do engagement with the strategic plan, that several of these things we have already heard and have continued to enact, in whether it's program or policy changes, and that there is more work to do. So if you, as you're glancing at this box of colorful boxes of themes, which I'll kind of just pause and allow you to digest a little bit, if there's something that strikes you as missing, please provide that feedback to us. We want to make sure that the things that are most important to you in this group are encompassed in these themes, and so that we can share this back again to the strategic planning team and make sure that they feed into the goals. And then, what we will further develop into objectives and strategies that will help us actually get this roadmap to a strategic plan done. So there's a couple things here that, there's no hierarchy to any of these, but just really thinking about the streamlining and improvement of DELC's processes, systems. Data, for example, is an example of something that was more directed towards the operational piece. And as we dive into the goals, which we have in the next few slides, you'll see the spectrum of the strategic plan aiming towards the policy program aspects of it, right, of the agency, as well as the operations pieces, recognizing that we are a new agency and that there are still lots of things to put together to fortify the work that we're doing at a statewide level with the cabinet agency responsibility. So here are a few of those, and we'll actually we've broken these out into some of the goals, and we'll be able to have a little bit better glance at those if it's hard for you to see those here.
Great, thanks, Karina. And then these next two slides really just highlight the 8 draft goals that DELC has currently for the strategic plan. And we'll go more in depth into these, so I won't read them fully in these couple slides. But goal 1 is really centered around access to tribal sovereignty, infants and toddlers, and 4 being workforce. I do want to say that the first 5 goals, I'm skipping over to the next slide, are really more so for the program and policy area. And then 6 through 8 are really more DELC operations. So goal 5 is really centered around cross-sector partnerships. 6 is around foundations, 7 trust, and 8 relationships. And I want to go back to the last slide just to kind of let you all read through them quickly, and want to know if anything from these 3 slides kind of excites you all, and if it does, feel free to let us know in the chat. Is there anything that stands out? And then we will be going through them in the next couple slides, just connecting them to the themes, and also just highlighting some of the examples that were provided within our conversations with external partners that really brought these goals and themes into the strategic plan. So I'll give folks a couple seconds on this side just to kind of read it, and then I'll go back. But yeah, feel free to drop anything exciting, anything that might be missing in the chat. And I'll go back to the first slide and just give you guys a second there.
We'll jump into the goals, and don't expect you to memorize these or, remember them for the next time, but just want to surface these and put them on your radar when our plan is to come back, and then spend some time looking and digesting the goals and really thinking about how you see yourself and your work contributing to this work, as well as thinking about what success towards this goal might look like, or progress towards the goal within the next 1 or 2 years. So just during those as questions to kind of maybe frame your thinking around as we go through them, but we'll come back and dive into conversations around those pieces to again ensure that your work is connected to the goals and that you feel seen and reflected in them as well, and that excited about the work that is to be done and is already ongoing to make progress and achievement towards these.
Yeah, thanks, Karina. So goal 1 being access, and I do just want to highlight that all of these goals definitely have more than 2 or 3 themes that really tie into them, but for the sake of space, right, we just selected a handful of them. Again, it's not really anything that's being prioritized or anything, it's really just highlighting some of the themes that connect to these goals. So all families having access to high quality and affordable early learning and care that meets their needs. And just some examples of things that we heard from external partners being improving the ERDC program by increasing funding, reducing and eliminating the waitlist, increasing availability of culturally specific care and expanding hours, increasing access to infant and toddler care, just increasing service for families, for middle income families, additional funding to cover transportation costs. And those are just some examples. It's definitely not everything that we heard, but just some things to highlight that we heard that really kind of came into consideration when drafting this goal. And if folks have any questions or if there's anything exciting as Karina and I kind of go through the goals, feel free to just drop them in the chat or come off mute, and then we'll just keep going.
And second, you'll see tribal sovereignty here. This reads, DELC honors and recognizes the sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribal nations within Oregon and ensures strong government-to-government relationships to benefit tribal communities. As DELG, we continue to learn and strengthen our commitment to building relationships with Oregon's 9 federally recognized tribes. So it's important for us to highlight this as a standalone goal. Our tribal partners who we had conversations with as well provided positive feedback related to current DELG and tribal partnerships and shared the need for that increased government-to-government collaboration and partnership, right? We recognize that there is work to do. Want to highlight, however, that this goal does not stand on its own. It is connected to all others that we'll continue to cover here, but it ensures DELG's commitment to be in good relationship with our tribal partners to continue meeting and increase, the needs to support children, family needs, while again, honoring tribal sovereignty in contracts, funding, programs, and everything that it entails.
Goal 3 is centered around infants and toddlers, and all families with infants and toddlers are supported through early learning and care programs that recognize and meet their unique needs. Again, these are just some of the themes from that initial slide that tie into this goal. And some examples that stemmed from our conversations were one being really just, we heard it a lot with providers, families, for just the need for more infant and toddler care options and incentives. And also the need for just streamlining entry points for families, providers, into these programs and services, and just reducing the access barriers.
Workforce, one that I am going to make the assumption is of interest to this group, and many others. I think every group, and there's just a lot of passion we've heard in our very few conversations as we've started sharing out the goals. But as we think about workforce, the goal actually reads, the early childhood workforce is diverse, culturally responsive, high quality, and well compensated. So all of those pieces, feeding into this goal, I think that even just what is there gives us a sense of what the feedback has continued to be, right? Requests and just an emphasis on the need for clear career pathways to get educators ready to apply for different positions, as well as bringing people onto the profession, the retention piece, compensation for folks to stay within the workforce. So all of these pieces that I'm sure you are aware of, that I know we heard from you as well, and those feeding into this goal.
Goal 5 being cross-sector partnerships, DELC partnering with the Early Learning Council and other systems, families, the early learning and care workforce, and communities to foster coordinated, culturally appropriate, and family-centered services that recognize and respect the strengths and needs of all children, families, and early learning and care professionals. And this was actually something that came up, I think, at every single group that we met with just the need for engaging in cross-sector collaboration and just having cross-agency partnerships to work on things like behavioral health and being able to serve parents and their children and just collaborating across silos with other agencies and focusing on outcomes.
Foundations, the next three tie into the more so the operations aspect, as Gabby had shared. And so as we think about foundations, really thinking about continuing to build that foundation for DELC as an organization. And some of the things that we heard that also feed into this in terms of the family and aspect was, for example, providing a request to provide more family friendly resources and materials around the programs and services that are available, understanding what is the role within that and just the continued work, the allocation of funding for increasing staffing levels, for providers, partners, and families, just many things that we can continue to think around the support and one specific to the operations piece, perhaps would it be like, the need to hire more staff who can provide supports to increase the, oh goodness, I lost my word. The efficiencies within our organization, right? And to just make sure that we're supporting each other, but that also we're providing the best supports to our external partners. So a couple of different pieces here, communications, continuing to look at what our communication approach is between DELC partners and the accessibility pieces of that as well.
Goal 7 is centered around trust, DELC building trust, DELC building the public's trust through increasing accountability, transparency in processes, and in their decision-making and data sharing. Again, this also came up a lot, just for the need to create a consistent process for reporting back to communities and really establishing a feedback loop where we're coming back and actually closing that loop. Continuing to invite the community to provide feedback and ensuring that community voice is prioritized and that we're engaging with minority populations and populations that we don't normally hear from.
And lastly is relationships, which actually ties in, closely again to trust. It's once you have trust, you can build relationships. And as you build relationships, you increase trust, right? And so this one leans into that, just centering the input of families, partners, and providers in DELC's work was a theme that definitely came through for us as well. And want to echo the need for consistent process to continue reporting back and recognizing that there is a lot of feedback that was received, right? And it might be the program lead or others who are joining these calls are making ask requests, and sometimes those make it through and just or there is a plan for it. And so just creating a better feedback loop to come back to partners and share around how their feedback is being incorporated and or what changes are happening or in queue. And that actually wraps up our overview of the slide deck that we had wanted to share the 8 goals. Happy to take questions or just feedback around these so far. Again, our plan is to come back and then just spend some time diving into these goals and really teasing them apart a little gets a way to say in terms of how do you see yourself contributing and thinking about what would progress look like. Some of it might echo the work that you're already doing, right? And so there is no need to reinvent a wheel on this, but just want to make sure that we gather your specific voice on this so that we can, as the strategic plan is being developed, make sure that we're tying it back to what you are interested in doing and what you're already doing and where that passion and drive already exists. Renee, I see your hand.
Hi there. Thank you for this. This was great. A couple of comments. I guess I would expect to see a little more around Delk's role as the early learning system coordinator, specifically looking at Raise Up Oregon and Delk's role in engaging partners to achieve those outcomes. And I didn't explicitly see that there. I saw pieces of it, but I think it would be really helpful to call that out as a driver, that is Delk's responsibility to do that. And then the other, another goal that I think should be added is family engagement. I saw supports for infants and toddlers, for access to childcare, for support for the childcare workforce, but I didn't see anything specifically addressing family stability. And, you know, Delk is supporting relief nurseries, home visiting programs. We have our parent education hubs in the community. So I think if we are not, as a state, intentionally identifying how we are supporting and strengthening that family unit, that structure, then the other goals aren't really going to come to fruition, or it's going to be a lot harder to do that. So I just wanted to add those as two additional needs that I saw. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Taking note of that for sure, to share back, especially as we look at these as kind of evolving based on what we've heard. Is it Jillian? Gillian.
That's okay, Jillian. It's like giraffe, but then there's the harsh G, so you never know, so it doesn't bother me. Just curious if tribes understand the language when it comes to tribes, because will ensure strong government-to-government relationships. They're each their own government. And so is the word encourage, or I'm not sure what is meant by the word that Delk will ensure, because I think from the tribe's perspective, no one can ensure anything except the tribe. So I'm just curious about that word. I mean, I can see encourage, but anything to me that says ensure sounds more regulatory, and I just wonder if the tribes are okay with that word.
Thanks for that. We are running, have other Delk staff supporting with the language and the revision. So I know we have our tribal affairs director, and it's a good flag for us though to just make sure that run that language through them. So I can't speak to can't respond to your question directly, but I appreciate that, and we'll make sure that we circle back with folks to get other eyes on that.
Thank you.
Karina, I just saw your note to go back to the bubble slides, and I'm not sure if that was recently or a couple of minutes ago. So just
no, it's okay. I figured it would be
back.
a better view for folks to kind of see a couple of the goals, even though I know they're spread out within two.
Yeah.
I saw a thumbs up. Brenda, before Renee. Okay, thanks. Taking note of that. Thank you for your time and sitting through and listening to us as we share these draft goals out. We'll share the slide deck so you can review. And if you have questions or additional comments that you'd like to share with us as you, dive into them, please let us know. Gabby will kind of go over the next steps, but we look forward to coming back and just digging into the different goals during the next meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, so like Karina mentioned, we will be back to do a feedback / engagement activity with you all at next month's meeting. But just some additional next steps to really kind of just keep in mind. As you all know, when we did our first round of engagement, the feedback that we collected is also going to be used to inform the next draft of the CCDF state plan, which follows a very similar timeline to the strategic plan. Jordan Pargeter with Delk is the one really leading that. So input, really gathered between both of these conversations is really also going to be used for that. So just want to kind of highlight that as well. So just something to note, we're hoping just to come back in either late April or May to brief external partners on the full contents of the strategic plan, especially since we're just here to share the draft goals, right? So we do want to come back and share the objectives and strategies with you all. And then in relation to the CCDF state plan, there is going to be a public hearing held in May. An exact date is really kind of to be determined. So I will keep Maria posted on that just so that she can let you all know once that date gets scheduled, if any of you all are interested in attending or really just sharing out that date. And then in June, external partners can expect to receive a final strategic plan and CCDF state plan. I think they're both due. I can't remember if it's June 1st or June 30th, but they are both due in June. So do expect that. And again, just really want to say thank you all. Thanks, Maria, for creating space. And I did drop a link in the chat just with the PDF with the updated slides, but I'll make sure that Maria has that to disperse to you all as well after the meeting. And if, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to jump in, and for anyone who's not in front of their screen or maybe listening in, Alyssa Chatterjee, your director, just did drop in a comment regarding the language around tribal sovereignty. And so just, it is the same language that is in the Raise Up Oregon that was developed with the tribal, alongside the Tribal Advisory Committee. And so that language around ensure refers to our responsibility in half of the government to government relationship with each tribe. So just wanted to read over it. Michelle, I see your hand.
Hey, I'm not sure if you said it and I don't know. Can you tell me what the Child Care and Development Fund state plan is?
I did not say it. But the CCDF state plan, and Alyssa, not sure if you're here because I think you might know more about it. Because I don't know the extent of it. I just know that it's a plan that we have to update essentially for the feds.
Yes, we have to submit, I believe, every 4 years with sort of interim plans in between. So our current one is posted on our website, but we're up for revising our state plan. So they're approved in kind of 2-year increments. And so the Federal Office of the Federal Administration for Children and Families develops what the template is, the questions we have to answer, the data that we have to collect, and it is generally the same plan to plan, but we always get new guidance the year that it's due. So we just received that guidance about a month and a half ago. It does not include the new rules that were just implemented for CCDF last week. So we're waiting further guidance on how to integrate that into the CCDF state plan process. So there will be a public hearing component and more work to come as we continue to consult with the feds on what that looks like. And I will drop a link in the chat of where that lives on our website.
Thank you, Alyssa.
I just want to add, just in case Michelle doesn't know, but the CCDF funds, they fund the CCR&Rs as well as, I believe, ERDC. So they cover a lot of the services that we provide throughout the state.
Thanks, Margie. Yes, the big buckets, the biggest bucket would be ERDC. It funds CCR&Rs, it funds a small amount of DELC staffing, provides funding for Baby Promise, inclusive partners, so kind of a variety of activities. And that is what dictates a good chunk of our licensing structure as well. And Begonia, I can answer your question. Yes, we've been getting a lot of applications. I think we're at over 50 so far. So really excited about that. And the position closes on the 10th. And so we're preparing to hit the ground running and start screening and moving towards interviews. And hopefully we can get somebody on board by mid-April.
Great. I think that concludes our meeting. Unless anyone else has any other questions, I will go ahead and stop the recording, and I will stick around if anyone has any lingering questions for me. But other than that, thank you so much, and we will see you all next time.